Welcome into the garage area. This is our second Richmond recap show. We're talking about the Cookout 400 and the Cup Series and the truck race as well. Those are the two series that were in action this weekend. And we got a lot to talk about after this particular Cup race. This is the first time that NASCAR has allowed us, not us, but people that actually matter in the sport, the drivers, has allowed them to use two different types of tires in a points-paying race that wasn't a road course and that didn't involve wet weather tires. We talked about it last week that Richmond was going to have prime and option tires, and that's what we had this week. I don't know. I don't know what you thought about it. I actually thought that put on a pretty good show. I thought that it added some pretty good strategy into the race, and honestly, I was pretty impressed with the softer tire and wish that we ran that everywhere.
Yeah.
And you could do away with the two different sets and just give me the red option tires everywhere, and I'd be happy. I thought that they wore out well. They had good fall off. You had great advantage on new tires. All the things that you're looking for out of a tire. That needs to be the primary tire, in my opinion. What did you think?
Yeah. I wish I got to see more longer of a runs on them, I guess you would say. But, they had, once they only put them on mainly in the third stage other than the Suarez and McDowell strategy and stuff that obviously showed they were way faster in the beginning. But, in the other stage, as soon as they started going downhill, it was automatically, change tires. And, they had so much of an allotment of tires they could do it. I like to see them have a little bit less of that allotment to force them to drive a little further on those tires.
I feel like we saw that at the end of the third stage there a little bit. Were they on prime tires at that point when Denny Hamlin was leading and Austin Dillon drove them down?
Yeah.
They were on primes.
Yeah, they were on primes. So they had that in itself, in that long run, almost played out similar to what we're looking off for tire fall off.
Right.
Richmond itself is an abrasive track.
Yeah.
But obviously the option tire was accelerated at that point. But when they have so many different sets of tires, they can just, as soon as the option tires went downhill, they could just go boom, switch back to the regulars and be quicker again.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely think that having fall off at an aggressively surfaced racetrack, if that's a term, that worked out well, and that's what we like to see. This is one of the best Richmond races I've watched in a long time. And people complain, oh, Richmond, the action track, it's not lived up to its name in years. And that's probably been true, but I thought this race was great. I love night races. I think the cars look better under the lights. I love the fact that there was a lot of action in the race as far as cars passing each other. I like the fact that on long runs you could stretch out and then you got into lap traffic and you could get guys to close back up on you. It's just the kind of racing that I really enjoyed seeing up until the final restart.
Yeah.
We'll get to that part. But I would say that as a whole, this is a pretty good race. I voted yes in Jeff Gluck's poll. I thought that it was a good race if you can divorce the finish of the race from the way that the rest of it ran. And I made a reaction video on TikTok. I had people coming after me saying that they totally disagreed with my reaction.
Yeah.
That shouldn't have been the case at all to be upset about the way that finished, because it was the most exciting race in the next gen car in a long time. And I agree that the race as a whole was good, but if you're saying that a couple guys getting wrecked for the win was exciting, then you're looking for something different than I'm looking for out of a race. But we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. Kyle Busch, he ended up having a wrist injury at Indianapolis. Did you see the replay of the wreck that actually he said that hurt his wrist? They showed it on the broadcast.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know. I saw the replay during the race, but didn't know that it actually hurt his wrist.
Yeah.
And then when they showed it again on the broadcast at Richmond, it was like, okay, yeah, I can see he kind of flings his hand off the wheel real quick when he hits the wall. You see people a lot of times in wrecks, drivers will take their hands off the wheel and crash and let the wheel do whatever it'll do. And then when they kind of regain a little bit of that post-impact control, they get back a hold of the wheel and do whatever they got to do to get the car out of the way if it's drivable. And that's not what Kyle did in that situation. I don't really know why that was, but it obviously did some serious damage to his wrist. He said that he wouldn't have been able to race if we didn't have that 2-week break. He at least wouldn't have been able to race the next week.
Yeah.
That's pretty serious, and I don't know what to really blame that on other than Kyle just hanging onto the wheel.
Yeah.
he had the thing wrapped up pretty tight, and he ended up cutting that wrap off. Steve Letarte made the joke that obviously he needs some sharper scissors if he's going to get that thing off there, because he was struggling under caution to be driving that race car and try to cut that wrap off his hand at the same time. But as a whole, he didn't run bad throughout the night, and I believe he got a penalty towards the end of the race too that he ended up coming back from, and I can't remember what it was.
I know they had a bad pit stop.
That might have been what it was.
They took a long time to get a lug nut on, but
he still ended up finishing 12th, which is where he started the race. So compared to where Kyle's been finishing, and he is a good race car driver at Richmond, and Richmond is a little bit more of a driver's racetrack, and you come back to this point of the key factors of racing, such as tire fall off.
Yeah,
Kyle Busch is going to excel, and probably should have got a better finish than that. His teammate won the race.
Yeah.
And people are making their different comments about that as well. Let me ask you this. Being that we're on the topic of Kyle Busch, he's not run well at all this year. I can't think of a single race that he's actually been competitive in, other than if you want to say the finish of the Atlanta race.
Yeah.
He was right there. But I can't think of a race where I thought, man, Kyle Busch might actually win this race. Yeah. None of it's coming to mind. He was running well at Indy before he crashed. It seems like if he's in a good position, he ends up getting wrecked or has some sort of issue no matter what. And that's a problem for his finishing. That's a problem for his current standing in the points and all that. If you see what we saw out of Austin Dillon, did you think Austin Dillon was going to win a race this year?
No.
No, I didn't either. Yeah. Did you see Austin Dillon running competitive anywhere?
No.
Did you think that Austin Dillon would get a win in any way other than lucking into one?
The only win I could have saw was maybe Daytona. That was
and he's proven that he's pretty decent at plate tracks. Yeah. Okay. So the issue is that we don't see Austin Dillon being a competitive race car driver week in and week out. But he showed up this week in that 3 car, in that Bass Pro Shops car, and kept it up to the front all day long. He didn't lead a ton of laps because Christopher Bell was really strong. Denny Hamlin was really strong. Martin Truex Jr. was running up there. Joey Logano ran up there all night. But Austin Dillon just kind of kept hanging around up in that top of the running order area. And at the very end, he was able to run down Denny Hamlin and pass him. I mean, he was a very strong race car seemingly out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So either he's been telling us the truth this whole time and RCR really is making some gains somewhere along the line, or they just hit on something really good. Now, if you're Kyle Busch, which is what I'm really trying to bring this all back to, are you encouraged or discouraged? Because people are saying that they think that he's discouraged because he has not been competitive to win a race, but his teammate now put a fast car on the racetrack and won the race.
I mean, if it's one race. I mean, I hate to say you get discouraged by one race when your teammate runs well. I would be more encouraged, like, ooh, maybe we have found something now. Maybe they tried something different in one car and not the other, and then maybe next time they come to something like this and they put it in Kyle's car and move forward with it.
I feel like that's a possibility, along with the fact of, like, I guess my biggest point here is I feel like now that kind of opens that possibility of you could just show up to a racetrack one weekend and have all the right tools you need and be fast.
Yeah.
Because that's what it was for Austin Dillon. He was just fast this weekend, start to finish. And the way that it really kind of got on my radar was, I mean, the fact that he was staying up front throughout the race. But they said on the broadcast that if he saved both sets for the third stage, that they felt like they could win the race.
Yeah.
And he was on that strategy where he was saving both sets of the option tire for the third stage. And what did he do? He won the race. So if I'm Kyle Busch, I'm not discouraged at all. I don't feel like I'm some sort of failure at RCR this season. I mean, their season's not been good as a whole, but I feel very encouraged that this could be us the very next week. I feel like at Michigan, we could run well if we just get the right things in the right place. So it feels like the switch could flip like that any single week, and that if I'm Kyle Busch, I feel good about that, not bad about my teammate winning and not me. Yeah. The only other thing I wanted to say about Kyle Busch is I keep hearing about his winning streak. He's got so many years with a win, and that means so much to him. Have you heard Kyle Busch say that?
Yeah, he did in an interview. Said he'd really like to get a win. I feel like he was more focused on that than making the playoffs.
Okay.
So he himself did say that.
Okay, I hadn't heard it yet, and that's why I was like, all these people are saying that Kyle is so focused on like keeping that winning streak alive, and I hadn't heard him say that. If I was Kyle Busch, I'd be like, that'd be great, but I'd like to run better every week, and be competitive every week. All right, moving on from Kyle Busch, let's talk about Christopher Bell, and let's start by talking about his crew chief Adam Stevens, who got injured over the 2-week break. Ended up having to have, I believe, his knees operated on. Is that right?
I just knew he was going to be out. I didn't hear what happened.
I heard it was a diving accident of some kind, and he messed up both legs.
Oh, wow.
If I have that information correct, which I may not. And he ended up being a remote crew chief this week. First time I can remember that happening for something other than a suspension. And he ended up putting together a pretty fast race car, apparently, because Christopher Bell was out in front for 122 laps. A big factor throughout the night, but he did have two pretty significant hiccups. One being he turned Eric Jones into his pit box as Chris Bell was leaving his. I believe that was the first pit stop.
Yeah.
And he ended up having a minor amount of damage from that. Not that was any kind of big setback, but it was a mistake nonetheless.
It was right on that front grill opening that's open for the radiator, and I mean air already flows through that, so it didn't really hurt nothing. I think it messed up maybe a mesh they have there or something.
Yeah.
So if anything, it would have let maybe debris go through and damage something, but otherwise, performance-wise, I don't think it hurt nothing.
It didn't seem to, because that was in the first stage of the race, and maybe at the stage break even, that took place, and he went on to lead 122 total laps. So I think he was doing just fine there. But the real issue that he had was a speeding penalty in stage 3. And if I heard the broadcast correctly, that's the third straight Richmond race for him with a speeding penalty.
Yeah.
And it just seems like we're always talking about this with Christopher Bell, that execution is his problem. I feel like him and Tyler Reddick, we have the same conversations, that it's either pit road execution by the crew or it's something that the driver's doing that's just not closing out races well. I feel like Christopher Bell should be somebody that's higher in the points and competing a little more aggressively for the regular season championship than he is right now, and it's due to mistakes that he's made. Martin Truex Jr., his teammate, he was running up front for a majority of the evening, as long as he was on the racetrack, and he ended up blowing a motor. Toyota has struggled a lot recently with their motors for whatever reason. Denny Hamlin blew up at Sonoma. I feel like Christopher Bell had a valve train issue.
Yeah.
Was it at Iowa? I can't remember where it was. But somewhere in the last few weeks.
Yeah.
Toyota motors have been a problem. Ty Gibbs ran that chocolate milk out of the exhaust pipes.
Yeah. Yoo-hoo.
Yeah. So Toyota's obviously got some sort of issue with the motors. As much as we're getting closer to the playoffs, are you concerned if you're a Toyota driver?
I would be.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that's something that should be majorly on their radar right now of what's going wrong and how do we get it fixed. And maybe they're experimenting with some stuff. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what the reasoning is, and they're playing with some cars that are a little more safe. Maybe not, because the Truex blew up and so did Ty Gibbs. Yeah. But my point being that I would be more leaning toward the fact that this is not something that they're messing with and they're having some sort of failure they can't identify yet. Yeah. And if I'm Toyota, I want to get that figured out.
I believe there is a rule. You have to run these motors more than one race. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I'm curious to know if, or you have to run, you're only allowed so many motors and you have to run them so many races or something. And I'm curious to know if these motors have ran more than once or if they're brand new or if they're trying something or maybe they're saving other motors for the playoffs too. So
it's a possibility. Yeah, I'm not sure how that allotment works and all of that stuff there. But yeah, that I don't know. I just feel like if I'm Toyota, I want to get that figured out, put to bed before we get to the start of the playoffs. Daniel Suarez, he's had pretty big stuff happening to him recently.
Yeah.
He got married. He ran a race in Brazil that he won. He signed a contract extension with the Trackhouse, and he ran really well at Richmond. He was in a position where he was further back in the pack, and they ended up putting on the option set of tires early, and I believe that was in stage 2 that they put those on. And he started coming to the front immediately. And you knew that you were going to have to give some of that track position back at some point just because of the way that all shook out. And he did end up doing that, but he was up front. He led laps, and he ended up leading, let me see here, 93 total laps. So, I mean, that's a good chunk of the race that the 99 car was out front. And he ended up finishing in 10th position. So I'd say overall, the strategy that they worked out was a net positive and got him a top 10 finish, which is something that they need to kind of keep moving forward. Ross Chastain, he ended up finishing in 5th as well. I didn't really hear a whole lot from him throughout the evening, but it was just the kind of a guy that kept working his way to the front and ended up putting that car in 5th position. Bubba Wallace got a great 4th place finish for him. Tyler Reddick finished 3rd. Kyle Larson was somebody that you didn't hear much of anything about all night long, and he ended up finishing 7th. Carson Hocevar ended up getting a top 10 in the 8th position. Chase Elliott quietly racks off another top 10. Ryan Blaney 11th, and as we said, Kyle Busch 12th. And there's some other guys mixed in throughout the field there. I think that the big standout there has got to be Carson Hocevar.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we mentioned this when we were talking about Christopher Bell or not, but he did overcome that speeding penalty to drive back to 6th position. So even though that they didn't execute well and kind of lost an opportunity to win the race, he still managed as best you could out of that situation. And that is going to bring us to Austin Dillon, who, as I already said earlier when we were talking about Kyle Busch, he was a contender all night. He earned a shot at the win. He was running up front. And I would say with about 45 laps to go is when you saw him and Denny Hamlin start to battle. Hamlin was catching lap traffic, and Dillon was catching Hamlin. He kept getting under him. He kept getting to his door, but he couldn't quite get by him. And he finally ended up getting past him and started to pull away pretty rapidly after he did so.
That was perfectly good, clean racing, too.
That was great. I mean, that was exactly how you're supposed to race. I wasn't pulling for Denny Hamlin by any means because I'm not a Denny Hamlin fan.
Yeah.
I wasn't really pulling for Austin Dillon either because Austin Dillon earned the opportunity to race for a win in this race.
Yeah.
But at the same point, like, you know that if he wins, he's going to be in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And that's just a pointless entry.
Yeah.
Like, why is he there? Because he won a singular race, but he's not run anywhere near good enough to be competing for a championship. So that part was that was the only reason I was rooting against him at that point in the race. And he ended up going by him, passing him really clean, like you just said, and ended up setting sail. This race had gone totally caution-free until 2 laps to go.
Yeah.
And we saw Recky Spinhouse send it into turn 1, lock up the right front tire, and crash into the 41 car, Ryan Preece, and spins them both around. That brings out the yellow flag, and now we're going to bring them all down pit road. Everybody that's up front is going to put the last set of option tires on because this is exactly the situation that they saved them for. And they're going to restart, and Austin Dillon's going to try to hold them off. First, he's got to get a good pit stop to maintain the lead. And man, did that 3 crew nail out a great pit stop for him. I mean, I was watching Joey Logano because obviously I'm a Joey Logano fan, but I thought that he had a shot at this point. Once the caution came out, I was like, if they come down pit road, put those red tires on and make a couple adjustments here for the short run, which he seemed to be good on.
Yeah. Let
him restart anywhere in the top 3. He'll be good. And he restarted second. So I'm watching his pit stop, and it was a 10-point-something second pit stop. Well, Austin Dillon's crew ripped off a 9-point-something pit stop. I mean, he was really good on pit road, that team was. And we're able to get him back out in the lead. Denny Hamlin actually lost the spot to Joey Logano, and they went back to restart. On this restart, all I could think of in my head was the spring race and Denny Hamlin jumping that by 50 yards.
Yeah.
It wasn't that egregious. But going before he ever got to the restart zone. And Steve Letarte said as soon as his nose sniffs that first restart line, he needs to be going. And all the replays that I've seen, the short clips on social media and stuff, they're coming out of the restart zone. Joey Logano got such a launch on the restart. I had to back the video up far enough to be able to see them coming into the restart zone. That was my concern when I first saw it. And I saw Logano get out front of them. I'm like, please don't tell me he jumped that restart.
Yeah.
But as I watched it, the 3 never went in the box. Like, I mean, he did at the very tail end of the restart zone, but he waited until they got clear to the other end of the restart zone before he ever fired. And at that point, if you get to the second line, the guy on the outside can go. And Tyler Reddick behind Joey Logano just gave him a shot. And
I think that was the difference.
That was the difference.
Yeah.
That's what sent the 22 out front. He was hanging on the outside of the 3 going into 1 and 2, and he finally got far enough ahead of them that he cleared them. They come around and take the white. And at that point, when they went into turn 1, I was like, man, Dillon might be close enough to do something to him here. And he wasn't. He was probably a half a car length back on him by the time they were in the center of the corner. And as they were exiting the corner and going down the backstretch, I'm like, it's over. Joey won this thing. And that wasn't the case at all. They go into turn 3, and from Joey said 5 car lengths back. That's a bit of an exaggeration. A good 3 car lengths back.
Yeah.
Austin Dillon sends it in there as hard as he can. Almost missed the back bumper of the 22. He hits him in the center of the corner, uses the 22 for a break, spins Joey Logano around, has to slow his car down so much to just get off the corner that Denny Hamlin, who was another 5 car lengths behind Austin Dillon, was able to beat him up off the bottom of the corner, and Austin Dillon just hooks him into the fence and crosses the start-finish line first and ends up scoring the victory after wrecking 2 guys in dramatic and very egregious fashion. Joey Logano had a very, you can call it a tantrum. I'm not offended by that. I mean, he was very upset. You could see that left rear tire flapping in the breeze. He obviously broke a toe link. He's blowing by everybody that's trying to get in line to come to pit road. And I'm saying out loud to my TV, just go to pit road. Just go to pit road. Just go to pit road. Because I didn't want him to go out there on the front stretch and pull something like Denny Hamlin did on Alex Bowman after the Martinsville race. I just wanted him to go to pit road. And apparently he kind of like, as the 3 guys, this is all secondhand information that I've heard this from, as the 3 guys are celebrating on pit road, he kind of does a mini burnout, smokes his tires a little bit by.
He only had one wheel that could spin.
Yeah, by the 3 cars box, and goes and parks his car in line. Now, what I did see, and I was curious to know what that conversation was like, was as Joey's getting out of the car, there's an official right there talking to him and like in his face, and I'm thinking, I wonder what he's saying to him.
Have you seen the in-car view from Joey on pit road?
Not on pit road, no.
No, he's coming down pit road and he's revving and doing a spin out, and there was a couple of times where he almost hit a couple people walking out into the pit road and stuff. Although I don't believe them people should have been there, but there was kind of a.
It doesn't matter. Yeah. You're on pit road. You need to be very mindful that you're around other people, other drivers, other cars.
So and I think that was the biggest issue at that point.
Yeah. So I'm as a fan, I'm willing to take any kind of criticism you want to throw towards Joey for that, because that's wrong. Yeah. I criticized Daniel Suarez for it at COTA 2 years ago, whenever it was. That's wrong. Like, when you come after the checkered flag's over, if you want to go hit somebody in the door down the backstretch, I'm fine with that. I'm cool with whatever you want to do. But bring it down pit road. Once you enter that line of cars that's entering pit road, you're done.
Yeah.
Like, you need to, anything else that you're going to carry out, any acts of frustration need to be outside of the race car.
Yeah.
If you want to go punch somebody, I'm cool with that. In fact, I'd encourage it. If you want to, run off at the mouth of the media on camera, which he also did that, that's fine too. I'm good with that. But don't put other people in jeopardy just because you're frustrated. I don't like that at all. Elton Sawyer talked to the media after the race, and they asked him if this was over the line. And he said, well, it was very close to the line. And I don't know what kind of an answer that is, Elton. That guy's put in a bad spot more than one time throughout the year, as he has to answer for the decisions that NASCAR officiating makes. But, dude, I don't know how you can say that. What do you mean that was very close to the line? You have to admit that was over the line. But then you got to admit that you made a mistake by not penalizing him.
Yeah. If he admits that's over the line, then they got to do something about it. And I mean, that's just.
And look, I feel like several times throughout the year we deal with things that are unprecedented, and this is one of those situations to me. I've not seen a wreck for the win this egregious. This looked like a video game. Just us playing video games against each other growing up, just swiping at the other guy as hard as you can, hoping that you can wreck him before you get to the line. This looked Brian Vickers-esque. Something like that when it came to wrecking somebody. Ty Gibbs Xfinity Series, stuff like that. But I don't know. It just is. It's like I said. There's no precedent for it. But I'm good if you were to say, listen, what we saw tonight will no longer be tolerated. This will be the penalty going forward. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I don't care if you don't penalize Austin Dillon, but if you were to walk out and say that after this event, I would have been fine with that. I don't think that NASCAR puts themselves in a bind by saying, hey, that was over the line. We're not going to penalize him, but we will penalize you going forward. I think that that's a fine approach to that situation. I am going to go off on a rant for sure because I've been thinking about this the last 24 hours or so. But I want your unfiltered opinion on the end of the race. Tell me what you thought of pretty much from the time that the caution came out to the time the checkered flag flew.
So, first of all, I don't know what Ricky Stenhouse is doing. Even that wasn't even for position. He's got – I don't think Austin Dillon is really fighting him. He's got a 3 to 4 second lead at that point. So, Austin's just trying to ride home. And there was like 10 car lengths before the next driver ahead of – was it Priest he was inside? Yeah. And that wasn't for position. I don't know what the deal was. There's a conspiracy that he was just trying to ruin the race for RCR because of the Bristol or the All-Star events. But I highly doubt that. But,
I highly doubt that too.
After that, everything restart and everything seemed fine. The only thing I agree with you trying to take out 2 cars for a win. The running into Logano, diving in as hard as you can to try and bump him. I could see you doing that to a point. It's been done before. Ty Gibbs for sure.
Joey
Logano taking out the 24. I mean, Logano was still going to make the corner. Had Logano not been, or I'm talking about like Darlington, even as hard as he drove, he was still going to make the corner. But like there at Richmond, he wasn't going to make the corner if he didn't use Logano for a break. So, but I mean, I could see that one, but the spotters telling Dillon, wreck him, or he said wreck him once, but anyway, so he goes down and wreck him, and I heard the audio after the 11's audio between the crew chief, spotter, and driver that this spotter came and admitted to me that they wrecked us on purpose, said they had to win. So I mean, if NASCAR is going to be consistent, they got to do something about that. I mean, Denny Hamlin admitted to wrecking somebody, just kind of shoved him. Just shoved him into the wall. It wasn't like he right hooked.
Yeah.
To me, this has got to be. Although I mean, now the race is over and done, I don't think you can do anything now. But I mean, there's rough driving penalties for a reason. They did it in the Truck Series to Lane Riggs for taking out a guy, and I feel like that was less egregious than what this was. And, I mean, it just...
on the teardown, Jeff Gluck tried to make that same comparison, and Jordan Bianchi, who I don't often agree with, said that you're comparing apples and oranges, and I do feel that that's the case in this particular situation. You're talking about racing for a win to earn a playoff spot, and you're talking about a guy that he needs settled down, and Lane Riggs at that particular race. Yeah. I don't think that those two things compare as well as people want to jump to that conclusion.
But, I mean, right hooking a guy is... I mean, even Denny said it felt like he popped his shoulder out.
Yeah. If
you saw the replay, how hard Denny hit the wall, his car came off the ground a little bit. So, I mean, on the short track, it was still
I guess that's my question is, you've seen, this is not unprecedented, guys that right hook other drivers into the wall get race suspensions.
Yeah.
And you could say that there's grounds for Austin Dillon to be suspended next week and lose his playoff eligibility over this. What do you think about that? Do you think that that's a real option for NASCAR?
See, I think where it comes, I don't see it happening. Maybe they think that it should. Other times it's more of this like revenge factor.
Yes,
that's the only difference.
Yep, I agree.
It wasn't a revenge thing. It was a desperation move.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you're 32nd in points. Your one time you run good and you get messed up because the guy spun out with 2 to go.
Yeah.
If he'd have made it around another 3/4 of a lap and took the white flag, it would have been one thing. I think Austin couldn't let himself know that he choked. Essentially, is what he was probably feeling at that moment. It's like, if I don't do this, I'm going to be I choke, I lose.
Yeah.
On Denny's podcast, he said the difference between 30th in points and at a minimum finishing 16th in the playoffs is $2 million. So, I mean, that's
It's a big chunk of
a
change.
big chunk of change, especially for a team your grandfather owns.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
All right. I got one more thing that I want to run by you with this. The three key players in this event are Austin Dillon, and the idea is Silver Spoon Kid. You just said grandfather
Yeah.
owns the race team. He's been terrible his whole career. He's backed into every win that he's ever got somehow or another, either by strategy or by wrecking somebody. If you want, everybody wants to point the fingers to Eric Almirola, that 2018 Daytona 500, which I disagree with, but that is the stereotype around Austin Dillon.
yeah.
He can't drive. He's only got a job because of his name.
Yeah.
The other two players are Joey Logano, who has wrecked other drivers to win races, is known to be an aggressive race car driver, and people hate.
Yeah.
So nobody cares that he got wrecked. Denny Hamlin, who basically fits that same bill,
Yeah.
has wrecked other people for the win, has wrecked people for not the win, races people very aggressively, especially when it's the pay window opens, and people hate him. So there's some feeling of fan toward driver that I think influences how people feel about this situation. So let's replace these three guys. Let's say this is Josh Berry going for his first win. And let's say that it's Ty Gibbs that's in Joey Logano's situation. And let's say it is Carson Hocevar that's in Denny Hamlin's situation. What do you think the perception is at this point? Like, do you think that people dismiss this because Josh Berry is going for his first win in a team that's going out of business and say, hey, he did what he had to do to win. I'm sorry that he had to wreck Ty Gibbs to do it. Ty Gibbs is going to bounce back. And Hocevar, he had a good run. He's been having good runs. He's going to be fine too. Or do you think people would have said, that's ridiculous, you can't race like that, the same way that they're saying now?
I would say that. I mean, I would like to think that everyone else would say that. I mean, it's an integrity part, this was, you know. I understand where people are getting at saying Logano and Hamlin have wrecked people for wins or not wins and stuff. But I feel like it's more an aggressiveness and not intent.
Yeah.
This was almost like a dead set intent. I don't care what happens to you. Mm-hmm. I believe like Logano and Hamlin, they at least let you continue on. In this case, Dillon had no regard for whatever happened to. It was like, yeah, I don't care. This is where I'm going.
Yeah, I've seen those two guys wreck people for wins. We just talked about it. I've seen Ty Gibbs wreck guys for wins in the Xfinity Series, and I feel like in his situation, it literally is, I do not care about you. I only care about me. I watched him wreck his own teammate for a situation he didn't need to wreck him in.
Yeah, and it took his teammate out of the playoffs.
Exactly.
You know,
and
for his grandfather's team.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and Ty was going to advance anyways.
Yeah.
So that to me is the height of selfishness.
Yeah.
You've seen Kyle Busch do the same thing in his past. It's a different Kyle Busch than it is now. I get that. I don't feel like Austin Dillon made a selfish move. I mean, it is selfish, but I don't think he went in there saying, I don't care about you. I only care about me. I think he went in there thinking, man, we never have fast race cars. I've got one this week. I had the race. You can't really say taken from you. You got beat on the restart because you're going up against a two-time champion and one of the best restarters in the Cup Series, in Joey Logano. And you got straight up beat on an overtime restart if you don't drive it in as hard as you can. And now you've done something that's so over the top to come from 3 car lengths back and drive in there absolutely as hard as you possibly can and still make the corner somehow. And now you see the 11 come underneath of you. You have to wreck him. Like, you don't have any choice at that point. You've already made this bet. You've got to see this thing through.
Yeah.
I don't feel like the attitude behind the moves for Austin Dillon are as bad as I've seen with other people. Austin Dillon, after he got out of the media center and he had to answer all those questions for his actions, I saw a video of him standing there where fans were outside of the media center and he's waving them over to sign autographs for him.
Yeah.
Austin Dillon's not a bad guy. Like, he's not, in my opinion, he's not a bad human being. Kyle Busch in his day, bad human being. He's changed. Ty Gibbs in those Xfinity Series situations, bad human being. Maybe still is. I haven't changed my opinion on that too much. Carson Hocevar in the Truck Series, bad human being. Has changed some of that already. We've seen some of that, in my opinion. Those were guys that did not care about you, had no regard whatsoever, and I think Austin Dillon was just in a position where I can't let this slip through my fingers.
Yeah, desperation.
Yeah. Okay, so you got anything more you want to say about that?
No.
Okay. Here's my issue. You've gone from something that we care a lot about, and that is racing. The integrity thereof. The love of seeing guys compete at a high level, hang on to a race car without crashing that race car into you or something else. The examples that people want to use for Joey Logano is the Matt Kenseth situation at Kansas in 2015. Joey Logano had a faster race car. He was running Matt Kenseth down. Matt Kenseth was blocking him wall to wall, apron to wall, everything that he could do. And Joey Logano went down into turn one and said, if you block me this time, I'm not lifting. And he wrecked him. Yeah. And that, to me, that is always going to be my position on that. Was it intentional? Yes. Did Matt have it coming? Not necessarily, but, I mean, Matt's trying to fight for his playoff life. Joey's already advanced. Joey could have cut him a break and didn't. But that he wanted to win that race. Say whatever you want about that. That's the reality of that situation. Martin Truex Jr., 2018, Martinsville. Martin Truex Jr. had a faster car and passed Joey Logano relatively cleanly. I mean, it's Martinsville. You can bump a guy without having any kind of problem. And he passed Joey Logano. Joey said in the final lap that I am going to hit Martin as hard as I can and try to get underneath of him. And he did that. And they beat and banged to the line, and Joey beat him. That was dirtier, for sure. I'm not a fan of that move. But without that move, he doesn't win the championship in 2018. This is kind of what's building into this situation. That's the problem with this format. That's the problem that we have with a win and you're in system. And then obviously the William Byron situation. When Joey got ran into the fence and said that, this is for the win at Darlington, I'm going to hit you and I don't care if you hit the wall.
Yeah.
I don't like that either, but that's a situation that he felt like he had earned that right to run him into the wall if that was necessary, and he did. Yeah. And won the race. Joey's got a history of racing people that way for sure. And that he's not the only one in that situation. He's a two-time champion in this modern era of the playoffs. Outside of Jimmy Johnson, I mean, who else are you thinking of as champion driver in playoff era? I mean, that's basically it, right? I mean, Joey Logano's got to be one of the first people that comes to your mind. And it's because of that aggressive style, I will do whatever I have to do to beat you for myself type situation. I don't think that my point being, I don't think that Austin Dillon races this way, even for a race win, if it doesn't mean you get in the playoffs and, like you just said, jump from 32nd to 16th in the points. If this was a normal Richmond win, I think that he gets out of his race car after finishing second and says, man, did everything that we could tonight, had a great car, these guys, and I think he probably gets a little teary-eyed and says, I just got beat on that restart. Yeah. If that's not for everything that comes with winning that race outside of the trophy, I don't think that he makes that kind of move. Yeah. This is a problem that NASCAR has created. When you incentivize guys to race for wins like this and to wreck people like this and have such a huge advantage for just crossing the line first at all cost, and there's going to be no penalty on how you get there, the ends justify the means every single time, you're going to have a systematic destruction of racing in your series. And that's what you've ended up doing. You took something that, for the first time in a long time, you had a really good short track race. And you had a great tire that you brought to the racetrack that Goodyear brought. And now you're in a position where everybody's talking about this race for the wrong reasons. And things are being brought up about NASCAR, but in a negative way. And it's coming from people like us that have been lifelong fans. It's coming from people that are just seeing this for the first time going, really? That's how they race in NASCAR? And people that want to make the argument, well, NASCAR has always been a contact sport. I'm fine with contact. If Austin Dillon went down in there half a car length off Joey Logano and hit him really hard and sent him up the racetrack, whether Joey spins out or not, and Austin Dillon goes on to win that race, I'm cool with that. I don't like it as a Joey Logano fan, but Joey's won races that way. And if that's how Austin Dillon chose to win that race, that's fine. I can deal with that. But to clean him out like that was bad. I mean, there was zero chance Logano was going to survive that corner getting hit that hard. And then to come swiping across the racetrack and right hook Denny Hamlin, that's what I have a bigger issue with. For me, Joey Logano, my fandom up here, Denny Hamlin way down here, and I've got a bigger problem with him hitting Denny Hamlin than I do him hitting Joey Logano. And I don't like the fact that he hit him as hard as he did for the initial contact with Logano. But I got a way bigger issue with right hooking Hamlin into the fence. That's just wrong on every level. I got as big an issue with that as I do Joey burning out down pit road. I mean, it's a problem. As far as penalties go, I don't think you can or should penalize Austin Dillon because you created this problem if you're NASCAR. How are you going to penalize somebody for doing exactly what they need to do to be successful in this pile of garbage that you created as a system in the first place? I don't have any issue with Austin Dillon.
I understand why he did it.
Yeah, I don't have any issue with Austin Dillon. I have a big problem with what took place on the racetrack.
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain that and how to make that make sense. If I'm Austin Dillon, I'm doing that too. I don't know if I can say that. I'm probably doing that too. Yeah. Just because of all the emotions that go into that moment and everything that means. But the racer and the race fan in me is saying that's wrong 100% of the time. And Austin Dillon is probably saying that too. That's wrong. I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
But I had to do that. And he's just put in such a box. He's going to get so much hate for this week. And I just don't think that it's 100% justified. I don't like what I saw on the racetrack. I blame NASCAR, not Austin Dillon. I've been waiting all day to talk about that. And that's I don't know if I really explained that as well as I wanted to, but that's all I got. That's the best that I can do. Anything else that you wanted to talk about from the Cup race?
I don't think I got anything more.
Let's just quickly hit some of the news items of the week. Connor Zilic, he's going to drive the 88 car for JRM in 2025. I don't know if you'd say that's similar to what they're doing with Zane Smith over at Trackhouse.
Yeah, Trackhouse themselves don't have a Xfinity team, so they have.
Yeah.
They got SVG at Colleague, now they have Zilic at Junior.
Yeah, they're kind of like, hey, we'll give a little bit of support here if you put him in your race car.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting. That's a fast car that Zilic is going to be in. If I'm Carson Kvapil, I don't know what his plans are for next year, but that's where I'd be a little disappointed because I think he's really showed out well in his opportunities. And if some of the rumors that I hear are true and maybe somebody like Brandon Jones is moving on, Carson might still have a ride at JRM. And I think he deserves one. So I'm cool with Connor Zilic being in the 88, but I want to see Carson Kvapil get an opportunity in something as well.
There's also rumors about Sam Mayer not coming back too, so there may be a couple of openings too. So
possibly going to front row in the Cup Series. We talked about Corey LaJoie being let go from the 7 car. Jeff Dickerson talked about that on Sirius and said that, a lot of times in teams you have situations where the crew chief is coming and saying, hey, the driver's not doing his job. Or the driver's coming and saying, hey, this crew chief is just not working out. And he said that really wasn't an issue for him with either of those guys. But he just felt like he had to do something and he wasn't convinced it was the right decision. I don't know how I feel about that. As far as him saying that he's not sure if it was a good idea to let Corey go. I feel like he's just trying to patch a big hole there. I think that everyone agrees that you got to move on from Corey LaJoie.
Yeah.
I don't think that Corey necessarily deserves to be kicked out of the Cup Series, and probably is a good enough driver to contend for a mid-tiered ride. But for the trajectory that Spire's going, I'm fine with them moving on from him.
Yeah. I did hear Denny Hamlin talk about it, and he kind of thought that maybe he should go back down to an Xfinity Series team and win races and earn his respect backed up like John Hunter Nemechek has done.
Yeah.
Of course, it hadn't worked out for him because Legacy themselves have struggled.
Yeah.
But
But he was on the right path there for that. There's a couple other things that I wanted to talk about, but we're running a little longer, I assume, than I wanted to. So we're going to move on past that. Let's talk about where the playoffs shape up now, whatever you want to say. What is the current playoff standings? Where does Austin Dillon winning, what does that do to the cut line right now?
yeah, so now Ross Chastain and Chris Buescher are below the cut line, down -3. Bubba Wallace +3. Ty Gibbs is only +18 now. So Martin Truex Jr., I mean, he was up over 100, is now only +78 with him blowing the motor. So, I mean, a couple more bad weeks, he could be in danger too. So
Yeah.
it's the only 3 guys left that can point in. 3 more new winners. So, I mean, with Daytona coming up, you never know what's going to happen. But
Yeah.
I don't expect that there to be 3 new winners. But one thing I'm going to watch for at Daytona, though, is now Austin Dillon has his win. If he's team-oriented, he'll be a pusher for Kyle Busch.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I'm going to watch out for. I mean,
You're going to keep your eyes on Kyle Busch at Daytona now.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a fair point. I hadn't thought about that yet, but I totally agree with you there.
yeah.
Austin Dillon's a good teammate besides. Like, in general, he's
Yeah.
very good at making sure that the other cars he works with them.
Yeah.
So, I totally agree with that. Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about from the Cup playoffs?
In the regular season standings themselves have tightened up. Kyle Busch, he still has the lead, but it's down to 5.
Kyle Busch.
Or he wishes, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Kyle Larson, he still has the points lead, but it's only 5 over now Tyler Reddick, 6 over Chase, and 21 points over Denny Hamlin. So all of them are within a race of, a top 20 of being in the.
That could be an interesting battle as that comes down the stretch.
Yeah.
With what, 4 races to go? 3 races to go? 3 races to go to the playoffs.
So,
What about the Truck Series? We know that they had their final race at Richmond this past weekend. Ty Majeski won the race.
yeah.
What's that do to set their lineup? Who is locked into the playoffs?
So we got Corey Heim, Christian Eckes, and Ty Majeski, who has won the last 2 in a row. So maybe they hit on something or going now. Of course, they've been at short tracks, which is one of his specialties. But it'll be curious to watch him. You got Sanchez, Rajah Caruth, Grant Enfinger, Tyler Ankrum, Taylor Gray, Ben Rhodes, and Daniel Dye, who was below the cut line before the race, actually pointed his way above Tanner Gray to make the final spot. So.
Who ended up with the regular season points championship then?
See, I don't know. I don't know if this is the reset now or this is the reset. So I don't know. Oh, Christian Eckes won the championship.
Okay,
that's right. Yeah, that's right. I remember them talking about he locked that up after the first stage or something.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's that I had to remember. So.
Awesome. I think that that's going to be an interesting battle in the Truck Series. If it comes down to if Heim or Eckes is not in the Final Four, that's a travesty to the way this season has been.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, if Heim and Eckes both aren't in the Final Four. That's what I was trying to say. That those 2 have been the dominant trucks all year. They need to be there when it comes to Phoenix. I guess we should talk about our picks this week. You ended up picking Martin Truex Jr., who was running well.
Yeah.
Had an opportunity to certainly finish in the top 5 and ended up blowing that motor. Ends up finishing dead last in 37th. That's not going to do well for you in our mock point standings or our picks, because obviously if your driver finishes dead last, I'm going to end up with a win. I picked Joey Logano and should have had the actual race win until Austin Dillon fouled that all up for me. And Joey Logano ends up being scored in 19th position. Hey, even though that's the way that things all shook out, I think you should still stick with the garage area for your picks because of how well those guys ran throughout the race. Joey Logano was a top 3 car most of the day, a top 5 car the entire day, and had a really, really, really good shot at the win. So definitely, if you're looking for picks for the race weekend and trying to preview who you think is going to be fast, right here in the garage area, that's where you're going to find that information. Anything else that you want to talk about for this Richmond race before we get out of here?
That's all I got.
That's all I got. So where we go next? Michigan?
Michigan
next. We're going to be back here in the garage area to talk about that race. I'm looking forward to that one. It's always pretty interesting race at Michigan.
Yeah.
So we'll see how the next gen car plays out there. Hopefully we get a little bit of tire fall off. Hopefully Goodyear learned a little something from this weekend at Richmond. And we will be right back here in the garage area to recap it for you after that.